I know you've gone through a couple different times now and did like some way too early lineup looks, but I got to go back to it because even if you want to throw Cal Ritchie in there, there's like 16 guys fighting for 12 spots. So how does this shake out in your mind?
Yeah, like to me, because Barzal's going back to center, and Patrick Waugh made that clear they're going to try and back at center, which I think hurts Richie. In this case, unless the Islanders do move out of Pajot or Zekas, like where teams calling now, with missing out on free agents, I wouldn't be shocked if the Islanders got much better offers than they were getting at the draft for guys like a Pajot or Zekas. Maybe they move one of those guys. But yeah, I don't think Richie makes the team. I think it's good to give him 30, 40 games with Rocky Thompson, learn Waugh's system, and then he's going to be the first call up. But yeah, my top line right now, knowing like we got a little bit of hints from Darch and Waugh, you got Druin, Horvat, and I'd put Palmieri there. That's a solid, again, number one. You could number one, number two, it's not going to matter. Then you do Barzal as a center, maybe with Holmstrom and Duclair. You put Lee, Pajot, and then Shabanov, and then you do Siplikov, Sezikis, and is Engvall part of the equation? Is Gakcomb in there? I definitely am missing a forward as I'm trying to think right now. Heineman, sorry, excuse me. No, Heineman would go there. And then you make Engvall, Gakcomb, McLean, fight. Richie, fight. I mean, could they put Richie on the wing? Sure, I think he is a center. I think that's his game. I really wouldn't do that. I'm not a scout, but just watching him play like Barzal, like I think those guys are built for the center of the ring. So that's kind of how I have it drawn out, and let those guys fight. And if you have to bury Engvall and Bridgeport, get some cap relief. I don't think anyone's going to scoop up McLean, and it's tough for those guys because if McLean has a better year last year, maybe you do move Sezikis without even thinking, or maybe even move Pajot, or Fasching could have had 20 goals last year. Like it's possible that he could pot an Engvall. Listen, if Engvall didn't have the major drop-offs in his game where he's getting benched another year where this is happening, if he played the way he played to end the year the last couple of weeks, like this is a guy that should be in your lineup and he could make a difference. The problem is, has Waugh lost that trust already? And there's no, great, you ended the season great, but we've done this, we've read this story so many times. Is it worth it for us? And I personally don't think it's going to be for the Islanders. Maybe they try to move him. Obviously, the term on his deal in terms of years makes that tough. They could bury him. It's a good call-up option. If Bridgeport wants to be better, he's going to help Bridgeport. But yeah, this is the, I always look back a couple years ago when Kiefer Bellows and Oliver Wahlstrom were fighting out in camp to make the roster in the spot. And they already knew they were both making the roster. It was just where in the lineup are they playing? And then you flash forward to now, and it's like, no, like people that were NHLers last year might even crack the NHL roster. They might start in Bridgeport. So I think that's so important because you want that internal competition. Even with Isaiah Jordan Schaefer, I talked to George about it. He goes, obviously I want to win out a job if it's between us two, but it just pushes me harder to go prove myself. So you love that if you're the Islanders and Darsh, because that's kind of how you build a winning mentality.
100%. And, something else that I could totally see this path for Cal Ritchie. Like you said, he starts in the AHL, and then with Pajot on an expiring deal, if you're waiting to the trade deadline to flip him for max return, well, then you have the last 35 games or so of the season to get a look at Cal Ritchie at the NHL lineup at that point.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view it. One, I think he's going to be a good mentor to Richie. I think that's important. Same thing with Palmieri. Like in my head, before they made all these changes, I thought if Richie and Palmieri were line mates, like that would be important for Richie. You have a guy that, a play driver down the middle that could pass it off to a guy that could score. And I think it's important to have vets. But yeah, for Richie, the one thing I'll say about development camp is he looked like a man amongst boys. Like he's physically mature. He's huge. Not the same way that Siplikov looked, because Siplikov's got a couple of years in him, but he just looks the part. Now you just need to see him, see if he could understand the WAS system and just shore up his game a little bit. I mean, he obviously was playing in juniors and had a good season, but he had an NHL taste before where he played. He scored his one career goal against the Islanders. But the question is, is he ready to go? Is there going to be any question marks? I don't think you want question marks. You want to say, okay, he's ready to go right now. And then you call him up when that's ready. And maybe he comes up earlier because of injuries. But I think letting Rocky Thompson get a hold of him will be absolutely massive for his development, because Darch is not going to rush any of these guys.
Last guy that I really wanted to ask you about is Anthony Duclair, because we know that Patrick Waugh said that he wanted to apologize to him in person, but what kind of role, I guess, do you see for him this year? I know you had him on your second line, but do you think there's a chance for the bounce back this year?
Yeah, if you're the Islanders, you have to hope that the injuries behind him, because if he doesn't have the speed and the burst, remember Elliot Friedman put out, the charts where you're looking at just the miles per hour difference from 2 years ago to last year, and that's a problem. So if he can't skate and be that speedy guy, I don't want to say he's worthless, but you're signing him for that reason. The reason I have him on the second line is because I'm not saying that Waugh is going to kiss up to him. I think Waugh owes him an apology. I don't think he was wrong with what he said, but you have a relationship with a guy, you don't do it in the media, even if it's great for us in terms of views and clicks and stories. Like, you don't do that. I think Waugh understood that. He got asked a question, answered it as honestly as possible, but they need Duclair. They're paying him, number one, and he's shown in the past that he can produce them. We saw 5 games with him, Barzal, and Horvat, and who knows? Last year was such a big story of what ifs. What happens if Mike Riley doesn't get hurt? Varlamont's healthy. Like, how good Barzal, all those things, right? So I could see him with Barzal, because if you're going to put Drouin with Horvat, I think Duclair with Barzal does make sense. But if he struggles in camp, I'm not saying he's a guarantee either. We have not talked to Duclair, and I think that's the biggest question mark, and it's hard to answer because we don't know what his mindset is. Waugh said he's going to meet up with him and say it in person, but he did tell it to us, who we then posted it. So Duclair's obviously well aware, and I don't know where his mindset. I don't know how he's feeling physically, so it's hard to gauge just how much a factor he's going to be if he's not ready to go. Maybe he's on LTR to start. I have no idea. So until he's at development training camp where we get to talk to him, obviously that'll be a better idea. But no, I talked to Darch and I asked him, are you expecting him at camp? He said yes. And I said, how big of a piece he is? And he goes, he's massive. Speed, power play, everything. Like, we need him to be at his best. So the Honors have to hope that that's where he's going to be come the fall.